Good evening once again, and let me thank the Barbados Council for the Disabled for inviting us to have a chat, as I would call it. Prefer not to call it a speech, but to make a presentation today on a very important matter, I think, that impacts our region, not only Barbados, but non-governmental organizations across the Caribbean. Protocols have already been established. Carrie Ann, I notice you're now the most honorable. So, yes, I think I need to also recognize you and your hard work you've done. I've known Carrie Ann for quite some time, huh? I won't disclose how long. But recognize the most honorable Carrie Ann Eiffel, BCD Board President Patricia Padmore Blackman, BCD Board staff, members, ladies and gentlemen. Today I've been asked to speak on a very special issue, and I'm sure that the topic was chosen of necessity, given the significant impact the issue of demographics will have on Barbadian economy in the coming years, and it's already started, as a matter of fact, as you would hear as I make my presentation. So I want to recognize the board of the BCD for identifying this as an issue and being proactive in getting a perspective from CPDC on the potential impact that demographics can play in the NGO sector moving forward. I note that this evening is not an ordinary AGM, and to be honest, when I came through the door, I expected to see 50-year anniversary all over the place. Because that is a massive milestone. Not many NGOs across the region can say they've been existing for 50 years and still doing well. Huh? So I want to recognize the BCD on its 50th anniversary celebration. 50 years of advocacy, service, sacrifice, leadership in defense of dignity, rights and inclusion of persons with disability. I think that deserves a round of applause. As we honor this milestone, we must also ask a forward-looking question. That question is, what kind of organization will the BCD need to be for the next 50 years? This is why the theme before us is so important: adapting to survive, how changing demographics are reshaping the future of NGOs. This theme is not a slogan. It is a warning and yet also a call to action. Barbados is changing in many ways. The population is aging, families are becoming smaller, the working age population is under pressure, care responsibilities are increasing, volunteerism is changing, leadership pipelines are weakening, the needs of persons with disabilities are becoming more complex, NGOs are being asked to do more, report more, and serve more people, often with fewer resources. The question, therefore, is not whether organizations like the BCD are still relevant. We think the answer to that is obvious after 50 years. The question is whether NGOs can adapt quickly enough to remain strong, sustainable, and effective in a society whose demographic foundations are dramatically shifting. When we speak about demographics, we are speaking about people, older persons living longer, but not always with adequate care, mobility, income security, or dignity. Speak about persons with disabilities still facing barriers in employment, education, transport, housing, healthcare, access to public and corporate buildings and decision making, small families carrying heavier responsibilities, and caregivers who are often aging themselves. Barbados is now clearly an aging society. The 2021 population and housing census reported that the median age had risen to 42.5 years, from 37.3 years in the previous census, roughly 10 years ago. The Barbados Population Policy also notes that the population declined from approximately 277,821 persons in 2010 to roughly 269,090 in 2021. While 19% of the population is over 64 and only 21% is under 18. Those figures matter quite a bit. They show us that Barbados is aging in a context where the younger population is not growing fast enough to replace the older population. This affects the labor market, social security, family care, health services, community life, the tax base, and importantly for us, the voluntary sector. Referencing a quote from Harvard economist and demographer David E. Bloom, he said that demographics can be a potent driver of the pace and process of economic development. The simple statement captures the heart of our discussion. Demographics shape the economy, the labor force, the care burden, the demand for services, the availability of volunteers, and the future sustainability of organizations such as the BCD. The economic demographic thinking of American economist Harry Dent is useful here because it reminds us that the population change is not only a social issue, it is also an economic and institutional issue. Dent's well-known spending wave idea argues that people consume, work, save, invest, volunteer, and require services differently at different stages of life. In other words, the age structure of a society helps determine what people need, what they can contribute, and how institutions must respond. Younger adults are often building families, entering the labor market, purchasing goods, services, and seeking opportunities for advancement. Persons in their peak earning years usually have greater spending power, greater productivity, and often a greater capacity to support churches, community groups, NGOs, and charitable causes. But as large sections of the population move into retirement and older age, the pattern changes. Spending shifts. Health and care needs increase. Disposable income may decline. The demand for social services grows. And at the same time, some of the very people who previously served as volunteers, as donors, board members, and community leaders may themselves require greater support. This has a direct relevance for the Council for Disabled and the wider NGO sector. An aging Barbados will likely mean increased demand for disability services, mobility support, accessible transport, home-based care, health services, advocacy, social protection, and inclusive community programs. It may also become smaller, older, more stretched, or less able to give time in the same way as they did before. So the lesson for us is clear. Demographic change is not a distant concern. It is already reshaping the economy, the family, the church, the community, and the NGO sector. Organizations such as the Barbados Council for Disabled must therefore prepare for a future in which more people may need support, while the old models of volunteerism, leadership, and charitable giving may no longer be enough. This is the demographic challenges facing the BCD. The population changes that increase the need for your work and services may also weaken the traditional human and financial base that has sustained your work. Aging and disability are not the same thing, but they are closely connected. As people live longer, more persons will experience mobility challenges, visual impairment, hearing loss, chronic illness, cognitive decline, and other conditions that affect their independence. Disability inclusion is therefore not a narrow issue for one group, it is a national planning issue. The ramp that assists a wheelchair user today may assist an older person tomorrow. The accessible bus that supports a blind passenger today may support a senior citizen next week. The safe sidewalks, signage, declare accessible bathrooms, inclusive workplace, and user-friendly digital services are investment in the Barbados we're all aging into. The economic implications are serious. If persons with disabilities are excluded from employment, the economy loses productive capacity, families lose income, and government lose potential tax revenue. Social protection systems come under greater pressure, and employers lose access to talent. Caregivers, often women, may be forced to reduce working hours or leave the labor market entirely. Referencing UNDP, Barbados They noted that 90% of the Barbadians with disabilities are unemployed, while stressing that persons with disabilities do not lack ability. They lack access to jobs, workspaces, public spaces, transport, and recreation. Whether the exact figure changes with better data, the, the broader point remains too many persons with disability are excluded from meaningful work and enterprise. This is not simply a disability issue, it's a development crisis, an economic loss and social failure. Barbados cannot speak seriously about inclusive growth while leaving so much human potential unused and untapped. The social dimension is just as important. Exclusion from work, school, transport, recreation, and public life creates isolation, loss of confidence, independence where independence should be possible, overburdened families, exhausted caregivers, and young persons with disabilities who may feel that society has no place for them. That is why the international disability movement has long insisted in the principle, nothing about us without us. And James Charlton's work on disability, oppression, and empowerment explains that this phrase expresses the conviction that persons with disabilities know what is best for themselves. It reminds us that persons with disabilities must be active decision makers in policies, programs, and institutions that shape their lives. The strategic response must be clear. Persons with disabilities must be seen not only as beneficiaries of care, but as workers, entrepreneurs, professionals, students, caregivers, community leaders, and nation builders. Barbados needs inclusive employment strategies, accessible skills training, targeted entrepreneurship support, incentives for employers, and accessible transport, digital inclusion, assistive technologies, these stronger job placement services, and social protection systems that support independence rather than dependency. These policies must be designed with persons with disabilities and not merely for them. The same demographic forces are shaping volunteerism as we know it. Many NGOs are built on strong traditions of voluntary services. I myself started with CPDC in my teenage years as a volunteer. So I, for one, know the importance of volunteerism. And many of the volunteers who would have come through the ranks of CPDC end up being team members. So it's very important to have a cadre of volunteers who are readily willing to give of themselves and their time towards the cause. So people attended meetings after work, organized fundraisers, this is in the past, visited members, sat on boards, gave rides, and used their own resources to keep organizations alive when there was no project budget and no donor funding. It was about passion and commitment to the cause. But that model was built in a very different demographic moment. When families were larger, communities were more connected, more people were available to start care responsibilities, to share care responsibilities, and many long-serving volunteers had fewer health, mobility, or caregiving pressures of their own. Today, families are smaller, more persons are caring for elderly relatives, young adults are under economic pressure, older volunteers are themselves aging. Some of the people who sustain NGOs for decades are now managing their own health, support, transport, mobility, or family responsibilities. So when we say that volunteerism is declining, we must not treat it simply as a lack of commitment. It is also a demographic issue. People may still care deeply, but they may have less time, less energy, less money, and fewer family support than before. Social media has also changed civic participation. And the younger persons here, I see smiling, could attest to this. Online support has value for awareness, but NGOs cannot survive on likes and comments alone. It is easier to post than to attend a meeting. It's easier to comment than to serve on a committee, and it's easier to criticize than to volunteer. The challenge is not to complain about the loss of the old model, but how do we build a new one? A future-ready NGO must create flexible ways for people to serve, shorter assignments, use digital advocacy, outreach, data collection, mentoring, fundraising, transport support, and technical advice. Demographics require us to redesign volunteerism. Goodwill must now be organized, structured, and respectful of the realities of our people and respectful of the realities of our people are living with. Demographics change is also reshaping NGO leadership. Many organizations in the disability and wider NGO community are facing a succession challenge. The persons who built these organizations carry institutional memory, credibility, and relationships. They know the struggles that were fought and the doors that were hard to open. But if the same small group must continue to lead, manage, fundraise, attend meetings, represent members, respond to crises, prepare reports, and keep the organization alive, eventually the organization becomes vulnerable. This is not because leaders have failed, it is because the demographic base of leadership has not been renewed fast enough. For the BCD, younger persons with disabilities must not only be invited to attend events, they must be prepared to lead. They must sit on boards, speak in consultations, shape advocacy campaigns, and use technology, media, and new forms of organizing to reach persons who may never have attended a traditional meeting. And at the same time, younger leaders need mentorship and institutional memory. The future, therefore, must be intergenerational. It cannot be older leaders holding on until they're exhausted, which happens quite often, or younger leaders dismissing the past. It must be a partnership between experience and innovation of youth. Demographics are also changing NGO operations. And as the population ages and the disability-related needs increase, demand for services will increase. More persons will need help with mobility and assistive devices, transport, and employment access, home adaptation, benefits, legal rights, family support. Families will turn to organizations like the BCD for guidance. Government and donors will expect NGOs to deliver results. But operational capacity is under pressure. Volunteers are fewer, boards are aging, administrative requirements are heavier, funding is often short-term and project-based, reporting is getting more complex, and staff are limited. The needs are expanding faster than the resources. This is the operational challenge of demographic change. Demand for NGO services are increasing at the same time the traditional human resource base, as I said prior, is weakening. This means organizations such as the BCD must modernize. We need stronger governance systems. We need better membership data, clear volunteer systems, succession planning, improved communication, stronger fundraising, and partnership with universities, professional associations, youth group, churches, private sector actors, and public agencies. I will take this time because I am an NGO leader, and I would want to say that it would be remiss of me not to make a plug at this time for additional support from the government and the policymakers. I think we have proven that NGOs have a track record in service delivery and representation, including the BCD, which is a leading national NGO. And I want to call on the minister responsible for the third sector that NGOs too deserve a $5 million fund. We have been steady and constant over the past decades in delivering services and representation through very, very difficult times. So we certainly welcome the Ministry of Labor, Social Security, and the third sector fund to support faith-based organizations running programs for young people and community strengthening. Our society can benefit from a rejuvenation of the church's role in communities and societies, but at the same time, we must not forget those organizations that have been at the forefront of the struggle to provide critical social and development services across the island in an increasingly difficult and resource-constrained environment. As I explore the possible strategic responses, I'm going to propose a number of things. The first, that persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are placed at the center of demographic planning. Barbados cannot plan for aging without planning for disability. Accessibility, care, transport, housing, employment, must become part of the mainstream development agenda. Second, the BCD and smaller organizations must strengthen their evidence base. What is not counted is often not prioritized. Data is an advocacy tool, a budgeting tool, and a way of making invisible lives much more visible. Third, the NGO sector must develop new operating models, including shared services, pooled administration, stronger digital systems, flexible volunteering, intergenerational leadership, better fundraising, and strategic partnerships. NGOs must not abandon their values. Thank you. NGOs must not abandon their values, but must modernize how we deliver those values. Fourth, government and donors must recognize that strong NGOs require investment, accountability, accessibility, data collection, training, technology, advocacy, and service delivery all cost money. We cannot continue to expect organizations to carry national and social responsibilities on sacrifice and passion alone, as we have been doing over the past few decades. At this point, I would like to speak to the regulatory environment. We as NGOs, we need an appropriate regulatory environment that is enabling for us and our work in modern times. We have been working the past few years with the ministry responsible for the third sector. I know there has been a white paper that CPDC would have worked on quite a number of years ago with members of the NGO community. And we do hope still that we are going to see in the near future enabling environment created through an NGO Act that is supportive of our sector and the important work that we all have done and continue to do. So what does adapting to survive really mean? It means accepting that an aging Barbados will require stronger disability inclusion and not weaker. It means that redesigning volunteerism because the people who volunteer are also aging and carrying heavier family responsibilities. It means renewing leadership because organizations cannot rely forever on the same small group of committed persons as we have been doing over the last decade. And it's not only to the BCD, I think this is across the board for many of our NGOs. It means strengthening operations strategically, including effectively incorporating software technologies and possibly artificial intelligence, because demand for services is increasing while the human and financial resources are under constant pressure and in some instances decreasing. But adaptation must not mean losing our soul and chasing after resources. The NGO sector was built on service, solidarity, justice, and community. Those values must always remain. We must change. What must change are the systems, the strategies, and the structures that allow those values to survive in a new demographic reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, the role of the Barbados Council for the Disabled is not small, it is not symbolic, it is an essential one within the Barbados and national context. The Council must be a service provider, but must also be a watchdog, a partner to government, but not a silent one, a voice for persons with disabilities, but also a platform through which persons with disabilities can speak for themselves. I must say to the government, include us from the beginning. I must say to the employers that disability is not inability. I must say to planners and architects, accessibility must be designed in and not added on after the fact. I must say to the education system, inclusion must begin early. And I must say to the wider public, persons with disabilities are not objects of pity. They are citizens with rights, talents, and contributions to make, and we do need to recognize that as a society. The next 50 years will not be easy. The demographic pressures are real, so are the economic pressures. The social pressures and burden is also real. The funding challenges are real, and the regulatory burdens we now face are also real. The strain on volunteerism that we all relied on heavily is under severe pressure. The leadership renewal challenge is real and is one that we have to confront. And the operational pressure on NGOs is real overall. The environment is indeed a challenging one. But, like the NGO sector, but more so the disability movement, we learned that survival has never been passive, and we've been resilient. Persons with disabilities and their organizations have always had to adapt to exclusion, to limited resources, slow-moving systems, and building services and policies that were not designed with them in mind. But now the task is not only to adapt to survive, the task is to adapt in order to lead. Let this AGM and this 50th anniversary celebration be more than a ceremonial moment. Let it be a commitment to building an organization that is inclusive, accountable, and future-ready, to renewing leadership across generations, and to modernizing volunteerism, to strengthening the operational capacity of NGOs, and to advocating for fair regulation, and to policies that allow persons with disability to earn, own, work, create, and live with independence. Above all, let us recommit to the principle that persons with disabilities are not burdened to be managed. They are citizens, we are leaders, workers, entrepreneurs, voters, taxpayers, family members, and nation builders. We all have a contribution to make. A society that understands its demographic future, plans for inclusion, strengthens its NGOs, and listens to persons with disabilities is indeed a society preparing not only to survive, but to be more just. So on behalf of CPDC, I congratulate the Barbados Council for the Disabled on 50 years of service, advocacy, and leadership. That's indeed a major milestone. May this anniversary honor the past and strengthen the present, and prepare the Council for the future that Barbados urgently needs. I thank you, and I wish the Council and its members here today best wishes for your AGM over the next few hours. Thank you very much.